The dust slowly settled across Training Dome 7, where there had been open ground just moments before. Now, there were alien soldiers, hundreds of them. They stood in perfect formation, their crystalline armor catching the artificial sunlight and throwing rainbows across the walls. Fleet Commander Rothik was the first to step forward. He stood 7 feet tall, with gray skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed fingers. His 4 eyes scanned the environment, taking in every detail. The dome structure, the artificial terrain, the small 2-armed creatures hiding behind barriers and rocks. "Tactical assessment," he ordered. His adjutant consulted a device strapped to one of his wrists. "Approximately 40 hostile life forms detected, Commander. They appear to be armed. Unknown weapon configuration." Rothik studied the creatures. They were so small, barely reaching his chest. Their bodies looked soft and fragile, wrapped in simple fabric and light armor. How could such weak beings have built the structures his? Sensors had detected from orbit? "Attempt communication," Rothik said. A Valkyrie specialist stepped forward and activated a translation device. It hummed and clicked, trying to find patterns in the sounds the creatures were making. But human language was unlike anything in the Valkyrie database. The translator sputtered and failed. "No match found," the specialist reported. "Their language is completely unknown." Rothik nodded slowly. This was not unusual. Many primitive species had unique communication methods. It simply meant they would have to establish dominance first and translate later. "Defensive formation," he commanded. "We will secure this area and study these creatures at our convenience." Across the training ground, Taiho Kim pressed his back against a concrete barrier and tried to control his breathing. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. "Taiho!" Jiwoo slid into cover beside him. Her face was pale, but her grip on her rifle was steady. "What are those things? Are they some kind of new training bots?" "I don't know," Taiho admitted. "I've never seen anything like them." Mira crawled over from a nearby position. "They're not in any database. I checked my tactical display 3 times. These aren't part of the exercise." "So what do we do?" Doyun asked. He had found cover behind a synthetic tree, his rifle aimed at the mass of alien soldiers. Taiho's mind raced. He thought about everything his instructors had taught him. When facing an unknown enemy, gather information. When outnumbered, use terrain advantage. When communications are down, rely on your training. He made his decision. "We treat this like a live exercise," Taiho said. "Whatever those things are, they've invaded our training ground. Squad leaders, get your people into defensive positions. Protect the objective. You want us to fight actual aliens with paint guns?" Jiwoo asked. "You have a better idea?" Jiwoo thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "No, let's do this." The cadets moved with practice speed. They had done this 1,000 times in training. Find cover. Establish sightlines. Wait for the enemy to make the first move. It didn't matter that their rifles were loaded with paint rounds instead of real bullets. It didn't matter that they were facing creatures from another world. Training was training. Up in the observation tower, Commander Yuna watched in horror. She had tried every emergency channel, every backup system. Everything was dead. Her cadets were about to engage an alien force, and she couldn't even warn the outside world. "Commander," Instructor Hana said quietly, "the kids are setting up defensive positions." "I can see that. They're doing it correctly." Yuna looked at Hana with tired eyes. "What good will correct positioning do against enemies we know nothing about?" Hana didn't answer. She just watched the training floor below, her hand resting on the sidearm at her hip. It was loaded with real ammunition, standard issue for instructors. 1 pistol against 400 aliens. The math was not encouraging. Down below, Rothik was growing impatient. The small creatures had stopped running and were now hiding behind various objects. They appeared to be organizing themselves. Interesting behavior for a primitive species. Fire warning shots, he ordered. Non-lethal settings. Let them know resistance is futile. 20 Veltari soldiers raised their pulse weapons and fired. Beams of blue energy streaked across the training ground, striking barriers and walls. Some hit the hiding creatures directly. Taiho saw Dian take a hit to the chest. The blue beam knocked him backward off his feet. Taiho's heart nearly stopped. But then Dian groaned and sat up, looking confused but alive. That tickled, Doyen said. It really hurt, but I'm okay. Taiho didn't understand why, but he didn't have time to question it. The aliens had just fired on his squad mates. Whether this was a training exercise or an invasion that changed everything. Return fire, he shouted. 32 rifles opened up at once. Paint rounds flew across the training ground in a storm of color. Red, blue, green, and yellow splattered against crystalline armor. And the Veltari panicked. Rothik felt something slam into his chest with incredible force. He staggered backward, gasping for breath. Looking down, he saw a red stain spreading across his armor. For one terrible moment, he thought he had been shot with a projectile weapon. Impossible. No civilization used projectiles anymore. They were ancient technology, abandoned thousands of years ago. All around him, his soldiers were falling into chaos. The small creatures were firing something at them, something that moved faster than their eyes could track. Energy shields, designed to stop plasma bolts and pulse beams, did absolutely nothing against these weapons. Mass-propelled projectiles, a Veltari officer screamed. They're using kinetic weapons. Our shields can't stop them. Rothik wiped the red substance from his armor and realized it wasn't blood. It was some kind of paint, a marking round. But the impact had hit him hard enough to leave a bruise beneath his armor. How is this possible? He whispered. His tactical officer ran to his side, ducking as more projectiles flew overhead. Commander, their weapons are pushing solid matter through magnetic acceleration. It's primitive, but our shields were never designed to stop physical objects. The revelation spread through the Veltari ranks like wildfire. These creatures, these small and fragile-looking beings, were using weapons that made their advanced technology useless. Every shot that landed was a physical blow. The paint marked them like targets, and the impacts hurt. Fall back, Rothik ordered. Regroup near the transport ships. The Veltari retreated, 400 elite soldiers stumbling over each other to get away from the colorful barrage. They had conquered 40 star systems. They had never retreated from anything until today. Taiho watched the aliens pull back and felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. They had pushed back an alien invasion with paint guns. This was either the greatest military victory in human history or the strangest training exercise ever designed. Either way, the fight wasn't over yet. Instructor Ha appeared beside him, having climbed down from the tower. She was breathing hard, and there was a fire in her eyes that Taiho had never seen before. Nice work, Cadet, she said. But they're regrouping. This is about to get a lot harder. Taiho looked at his paint-splattered rifle, then at the mass of alien soldiers gathering near their ships. Then I guess we better reload, he said. The morning sun rose over the military academy like it did every other day. Birds sang in the trees outside the massive training dome. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. Commander Yuna Park stood at the window of the observation tower, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She watched the cadets gather below, 32 young men and women checking their gear and talking in excited voices. They were third-year students, most of them around 19 years old. Today was their final evaluation before summer break. Yuna remembered being that young once. full of energy and dreams about protecting Earth from threats that seemed so far away. Now, she was 43, and her job was to turn these children into soldiers. All cadets report to Assembly Point Alpha. Her voice echoed through the speakers. Down on the training ground, Tae-ho Kim finished strapping on his vest and looked at his squad mates. He had known these 3 people for 2 years now. They had trained together, eaten together, and sometimes failed together. But they had also grown stronger together. Ji Woo-han was checking her rifle for the 3rd time. She always did that. Some people called it nervous habit, but Tae-ho knew it was just her way of being careful. Ji-woo never left anything to chance. You know those paint rounds won't suddenly disappear, right? Myra Song said with a small smile. She was the calmest person Tae-ho had ever met. Nothing seemed to shake her, not even the hardest training exercises. I know, Ji-woo replied without looking up. But checking never hurt anyone. Daeun Lee jumped over to join them, slightly out of breath. Sorry. My alarm didn't go off. Your alarm never goes off, Tae-ho said, but he was grinning. Come on, Commander Park is about to give the briefing. The 32 cadets gathered in a half circle around a holographic display. Commander Yuna walked down from the tower and stood before them, her posture straight and professional. Today's exercise is simple, she began. Training Dome 7 has been set up to look like an alien outpost. Your mission is to capture this outpost and hold it for 6 hours against automated defense drones. The drones will attack in waves, getting harder each time. Your rifles are loaded with paint rounds. If you get hit in a vital area, you're out. Questions? A cadet near the back raised his hand. What kind of aliens, Commander? Yuna almost smiled. Does it matter? An enemy is an enemy. You adapt, you overcome, you win. That's what soldiers do. The cadets nodded. They had heard this lesson many times. One more thing, Yuna added. Our weather satellites are showing some interference. Solar flare activity. Communications might get spotty during the exercise, so don't panic if your radio's cut out. Instructor Choi will be monitoring everything from the observation tower. Instructor Hana Choi waved from the tower window. She was younger than Commander Yuna, maybe 35, with short hair and sharp eyes. Unlike Yuna, who had spent most of her career in command positions, Hana had actually seen real combat. She had the scars to prove it. The cadets marched into Training Dome 7. The dome was enormous, nearly a kilometer across, filled with artificial terrain. There were rocky hills, fake buildings, and patches of forest made from synthetic trees. It looked like a small alien world. Tae-ho led his squad to their assigned position near the center of the dome. The mock outpost was there, a collection of strange buildings with weird angles and glowing lights. Okay, everyone knows the plan, Tae-ho said. Ji-woo, you take the left entrance. Myra, you have the right. Daeun, find high ground and give us cover. I'll push through the middle. They nodded and moved out without another word. 2 years of training had made communication almost unnecessary. They knew how each other thought, but 300 kilometers above their heads, something was happening that no amount of training could have prepared them for. The Valkyrie scouting fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a flash of blue light. There were 5 ships, sleek and silver, carrying 400 of the finest warriors in the Valkyrie Empire. Fleet Commander Rothek stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the view screen in confusion. This was wrong. This was very, very wrong. Navigation officer, he said, his voice calm but cold. Where are we? The navigation officer's hands trembled over his console. I don't know, Commander. Our systems malfunctioned during the jump. We should be near the Kethram moon, but instead we're orbiting an unknown planet, Rothek finished. He studied the blue and green world below them. It was beautiful, covered in oceans and forests. And according to his sensors, it was full of life. "Sir, I'm detecting settlements," another officer reported. "Large population centers. This planet is inhabited by an intelligent species." Rothik's 4 eyes narrowed. The Velthari Empire had conquered 40 star systems. They had met many species, most of them weak and easily controlled. Perhaps this lost journey would not be a complete waste after all. "Scan for military installations," he ordered. "Find me a target for reconnaissance." The sensors swept across the planet and locked onto a large heat signature on one of the continents. A domed structure, filled with armed life forms. "That looks like a military base," Rothik said. "We will investigate." Prepared the landing force. 400 Velthari soldiers assembled in the transport bay. They were tall, 7 feet on average, with gray skin and 4 arms. Their crystalline armor gleamed under the lights. They carried pulse weapons that could stun or kill with equal ease. Rothik addressed his troops through the ship's speakers. "We have found an unknown species. We will make contact on our terms. Descend to the military installation and secure the area. Non-lethal force only until we understand what we're dealing with." The soldiers cheered. They had never lost a battle. They saw no reason why today would be different. The transport ships launched from the fleet and fell toward Earth like silver arrows. They punched through the atmosphere, their shields glowing from the heat. Inside Training Dome 7, Taiho had just captured the mock outpost. The automated drones hadn't even launched yet. He was feeling pretty good about himself. Then the sky lit up. "What the hell is that?" Jiwoo shouted, pointing upward. Through the dome's transparent ceiling, they could see something falling from the sky. Something big. Something that definitely wasn't part of the exercise. The Velthari transport ships crashed through the domes, emergency barriers, and landed in the center of the training area. Dust and debris flew everywhere. Cadets scrambled for cover, not understanding what was happening. Commander Yuna reached for the emergency communication panel and found it completely dead. The solar interference had knocked out everything. She looked down at the training floor, where alien soldiers were materializing in waves of light, and felt her heart stop. The cadets were alone, and first contact had just begun. Fleet Commander Rothik stood behind the protective hull of his transport ship and tried to understand what had just happened. His armor was covered in red and blue paint. His soldiers were scattered around him, some nursing bruises, others simply staring at nothing with shock in their eyes. In 40 star systems, across hundreds of battles, the Velthari had never experienced anything like this. "Report," Rothik demanded. "How many casualties?" His medical officer checked his scanner. "No deaths, Commander. But 47 soldiers are reporting significant pain from impact wounds. 12 have possible bone fractures, and..." He hesitated. "And what?" 23 soldiers are refusing to return to combat. They say the projectile weapons are too fast to dodge, and our shields offer no protection. They're calling it suicide to fight these creatures." Rothik closed his 4 eyes and took a deep breath. Cowardice was punishable by death in the Velthari military. But how could he execute soldiers for fearing weapons that actually worked against them? "What have we learned about their technology?" he asked. His science officer stepped forward, still picking paint out of the joints of his armor. "The projectiles appear to be simple metal casings filled with colored liquid. They're not designed to kill, Commander. They're marking rounds. Training ammunition." "Training ammunition?" "Yes, sir. These creatures are using weapons meant for practice, not actual combat." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Rothik looked across the training ground at the small figures darting between cover positions. They moved with coordination and purpose. They communicated with hand signals when their voices couldn't carry. They were functioning as a military unit, but they were using training weapons. What kind of warriors train with weapons that can defeat our shields? Rothek murmured. No one had an answer. Across the training ground, Taiho was organizing his forces. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a strange calm. Whatever these aliens were, they could be hurt. They could be pushed back. And that meant they could be beaten. All squad leaders, report, he called out. Squad 1. Ready. Jiwo responded from the left flank. Squad 2. Ready. Myra confirmed from the right. Squad 3. Ready. Doyan added from his elevated position. I've got clear sightlines on their ships. Squad 4 through 8, standing by. Came other voices across the training ground. Instructor Hana moved to Taiho's position. She had drawn her sidearm, but kept it holstered. Using real bullets might escalate things beyond control. For now, the paint guns were working. You've taken command well, she told Taiho. But those aliens are regrouping. They'll learn from their mistakes. Then we need to hit them before they're ready. Hana raised an eyebrow. Aggressive. I like it. What's your plan? Taiho pointed at the alien transport ships. They landed right in the middle of our training ground. That means they're surrounded. If we can push them back toward the dome walls, we can pin them down. You want to encircle 400 alien soldiers with 32 cadets. 33, Hana corrected. She unclipped her paint gun from her back. Standard issue for instructors, same as the cadets carried. I'm not sitting this one out. Taiho grinned despite the situation. All right. 33 against 400. I've seen worse odds in video games. This isn't a game, cadet. No, but the tactics are the same. Control the terrain. Force the enemy to react. Never let them set the pace. Hana stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Give the orders. Taiho activated his short-range radio. The interference that had killed long-range communications didn't affect their local channels. All squads, this is Cadet Kim. We're going on the offensive. Squads 1 and 3, move left around the synthetic forest. Squads 2 and 4, go right through the rocky section. Everyone else, keep them pinned from the center. We're going to push them back to the walls. Understood, came the chorus of responses. The cadets moved out like flowing water, using every piece of cover the training ground offered. They had practiced this dome's layout hundreds of times. They knew every rock, every building, every shadowy corner where an enemy might hide. The Velthri did not. Rothek saw the movement and felt a chill run through his body. The creatures were spreading out, flanking his position from multiple angles. It was classic encirclement tactics, executed with frightening precision. They're trying to surround us, his tactical officer warned. I can see that. Form defensive perimeter around the ships. Commander, should we return fire? Rothek hesitated. Their pulse weapons had barely slowed the creatures down. The stun setting that should have paralyzed any known species merely knocked these beings off their feet for a moment. Their nervous systems processed the energy differently somehow. Full power settings, he ordered grimly. Lethal force authorized. The Velthri soldiers adjusted their weapons and opened fire. This time, the beams were bright red instead of blue. Kill shots instead of stun rounds. Myra was the first to get hit. The beam struck her cover position, melting a hole through the concrete barrier. She rolled away just in time, her heart pounding. They upgraded their weapons. She shouted into her radio. Those shots are lethal now. Then don't get hit, Taiho responded. Keep moving, keep firing. Don't give them easy targets. The battle transformed into a deadly dance. Cadets sprinted between cover positions, firing paint rounds while dodging energy beams. The aliens tried to track them, but humans moved in unpredictable patterns. They jumped, rolled, and zigzagged in ways the Velthri had never seen. Doyen had the best position on a small, hill overlooking the alien formation. He fired in steady bursts, each shot finding its target. Paint splattered across Valkyrie armor, marking soldiers who would later report psychological trauma from the experience. "Got another one," he called out. "They're bunching up near the center ship." "Good," Jiwoo responded. "Squad 1 is in position. We're ready to push from the left." "Squad 2 ready on the right," Myra confirmed. "Just give the word." Taiho counted the alien soldiers still standing. Many had retreated behind their ships. Others were lying on the ground, overcome by the pain of repeated impacts. The paint rounds weren't deadly, but getting hit over and over by fast-moving projectiles took a physical and mental toll. "All squads converging assault," Taiho ordered. "Push them towards Sector 4. Don't let them regroup." The cadets attacked from every direction at once. Paint flew through the air in colorful streams. The Valkyrie, despite their superior numbers and deadly weapons, found themselves retreating step by step. Rothak couldn't believe what he was seeing. His elite soldiers, warriors who had crushed rebellions and conquered planets, were being herded like animals by creatures half their size. "Stand your ground," he bellowed. "We are a Valkyrie. We do not run." But his soldiers weren't listening. The paint rounds kept coming, relentless and impossible to stop. One by one, warriors threw down their weapons and covered their heads. Unable to take any more, Commander Yuna watched from the tower, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know if they were tears of fear or pride. Her cadets, her children, in all but blood, were winning a battle that should have been impossible. "Come on," she whispered. "Finish this." And the cadets kept pushing, driving the alien army back toward the dome walls, one paint round at a time. The battle had raged for 3 hours. 3 hours of running, shooting, and surviving. The artificial sun inside Training Dome 7 had moved across the ceiling, casting long shadows over a battlefield covered in paint splatters of every color. Fleet. Commander Rothak sat with his back against his transport ship, breathing heavily. His armor was no longer crystalline silver. It was a mess of red, blue, yellow, and green. Every color represented a hit he had taken. Every hit represented a failure. His adjutant crawled over to him, keeping low to avoid the constant stream of projectiles. The adjutant's armor was equally colorful. "Commander," he said, "I have completed the analysis you requested. Tell me." The adjutant swallowed hard. "Sir, our scans confirm that this structure is a training facility. The heat signatures we detected are not combat soldiers. They are students." Rothak turned to stare at his adjutant with all 4 eyes. "Students?" "Yes, Commander. Our translation software finally decoded some of their communications. They keep referring to themselves as cadets. Based on their physical development and communication patterns, they appeared to be adolescents. Young members of their species, not yet fully grown." The words hit Rothak harder than any paint round. He looked across the battlefield at the small figures that had been tormenting his army. Those weren't soldiers. Those were children. Untrained children with practice weapons. "They're young," Rothak whispered. "We're being defeated by their young." "It appears so, Commander." Rothak thought about his own species. Valkyrie warriors trained for decades before seeing combat. They studied tactics, learned weapon systems, and practiced until fighting became as natural as breathing. These humans threw their barely grown offspring into battle. Simulations with functioning weapons. What kind of species did such things? And more importantly, what kind of military would these children become when they finished their training? Across the training ground, Taiho was running low on ammunition. His squad had been pushing hard for hours. And paint rounds didn't last forever. "Ammo check," he called out. 20 rounds. Jiwoo reported. 15, Myra added. "I'm almost out." Diane admitted. Maybe 10 shots left. Instructor Hana appeared at Taiho's side. She was covered in dust and grime, her uniform torn in several places from close calls with alien weapons. But she was smiling. Supply cache at point 7, she said. I stashed extra ammunition there before the exercise started. Old habit from my combat days. You're beautiful, Taiho said without thinking. Hana laughed. Save the compliments for after we win. Jiwoo, take squad 1 to the cache. Grab everything you can carry. On it. Jiwoo and her squad disappeared into the artificial terrain, moving fast and quiet. The aliens had stopped trying to advance. They were clustered around their ships like frightened animals, firing occasional shots that the cadets easily avoided. Mira studied the alien formation from behind a synthetic boulder. They're breaking, she observed. Look at their body language. Half of them aren't even holding their weapons anymore. Psychological warfare, Hana said. The paint rounds aren't lethal, but getting hit repeatedly wears down morale. They expected to conquer this facility easily. Instead, they're getting humiliated by kids with toy guns. They're not toys, Taiho corrected. They're training weapons. To them, there's no difference. That's what's terrifying them. They can't understand how a training weapon can bypass all their technology. Rothak had reached the same conclusion. His science officer had explained it to him twice, but he still struggled to accept it. Their projectile weapons are kinetic-based, the science officer had said. They push physical mass at high speeds using magnetic acceleration. Our shields are designed to deflect energy weapons, plasma, and radiation. They were never meant to stop solid objects. Why not? Rothak had demanded. Because no advanced civilization uses projectile weapons anymore, Commander. They're considered obsolete technology. Inefficient. Primitive. Primitive. That word kept echoing in Rothak's mind. The humans used primitive weapons that no civilized species would consider. And those primitive weapons were destroying his elite force. He looked at his soldiers. Out of 400, perhaps 200, were still capable of fighting. The rest had been hit so many times that they'd simply given up. Some were lying on the ground, groaning in pain. Others sat with blank expressions, their spirits completely broken. Rothak had commanded armies across 40 star systems. He had seen soldiers die in battle, seen them sacrifice everything for victory. But he had never seen warriors give up simply because they couldn't handle being hit by colored liquid. But he understood it. The paint rounds didn't just hurt physically. Each impact was a reminder that their technology was useless. Each colorful splatter on their armor was proof that they were helpless. Commander, a soldier shouted. They're moving again. Jiwoo had returned with fresh ammunition. The cadets were spreading out once more, preparing for another assault. Rothak watched them communicate with hand signals, moving as one unit despite their youth and inexperience. No, he realized. Not inexperienced. They moved like veterans. They thought like veterans. Whatever training program these humans used, it produced warriors that could match his best soldiers, who were now cowering behind transport ships, afraid of paint. Commander, his adjutant said quietly, what are your orders? Rothak looked at the dome wall surrounding them. The cadets had pushed his army into a corner. They were surrounded on 3 sides, with nowhere to retreat. If the battle continued, his soldiers would be completely overwhelmed. And then what? Would the humans' actual military arrive? Would real soldiers with real weapons finish what the cadets had started? Rothak thought about his empire. The Valkyrie controlled 40 star systems. They had millions of soldiers, thousands of ships. They could send a proper invasion force to this planet and crush these humans through sheer numbers. But as he watched the cadets prepare their final assault, he knew the truth. If human children could do this with training weapons, what would human adults do with actual weapons of war? Some battles were not worth winning. Some enemies were not worth making. "Lay down your weapons," Rothick commanded. His soldiers stared at him in shock. A Valkyrie commander had never given such an order. In their entire history, no Valkyrie force had ever surrendered. "Commander?" his adjutant asked. "We cannot win this battle," Rothick said. "And even if we could, we cannot win the war that would follow. These humans are too dangerous. Their young fight better than our best. Their primitive weapons defeat our advanced technology. If we continue, we will all die. And if we kill their children, they will hunt us across the stars." He stood up slowly, raising all four arms in a gesture of submission. "We yield," Rothick announced in a voice that carried across the battlefield. His translator had finally synced with human language. "We yield to your forces." Taiho saw the alien commander rise with his arms raised. He saw the other aliens dropping their weapons, stepping away from their defensive positions. "Hold fire!" Taiho shouted. Everyone hold fire. The training ground fell silent for the first time in hours. Cadets and aliens stared at each other across the paint-splattered battlefield, neither side quite believing what had just happened. Did they just surrender? Jiwoo asked. Myra lowered her rifle slowly. "I think they did." Dayan climbed down from his sniper position, shaking his head in disbelief. "We just won first contact." With paint guns, Instructor Hana walked toward the alien commander, her hands visible and empty. Whatever came next, they needed to handle it carefully. The fighting was over, but the real challenges were just beginning. 4 hours after the aliens surrendered, help finally arrived. The solar interference cleared as mysteriously as it had appeared, and Commander Yuna's emergency signals reached the outside world. The first response came from the local military garrison. Trucks and armored vehicles surrounded Training Dome 7 within 20 minutes. Real soldiers with real weapons poured into the facility, securing the perimeter and establishing a defensive line. Then came the helicopters. Dozens of them, carrying officers, scientists, and government officials. They landed on the grounds outside the dome, creating a small city of tents and equipment. General Woojin Beek was among the first to enter the dome itself. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face carved from years of military service. He had seen many strange things during his career. Nothing had prepared him for this. 340 Valkyrie soldiers sat in organized groups across the training ground. They had been disarmed, their weapons collected and placed under guard. But they weren't restrained. They simply sat there, waiting, their paint-covered armor looking almost comical under the artificial lights, and guarding them were 33 exhausted humans. Cadets and one instructor, still holding paint-splattered rifles. Their uniforms dirty and torn. General Beek walked up to Commander Yuna, who saluted despite the trembling in her hands. "Report," he said. Yuna took a deep breath and delivered her report in a professional tone. She explained the exercise, the interference, the sudden arrival of the alien ships. She described how the cadets had organized their defense, how the paint rounds had proven unexpectedly effective, how the battle had raged for 3 hours until the alien commander surrendered. When she finished, General Beek was silent for a long moment. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that these cadets defeated 400 alien soldiers with paint guns?" "Yes, sir." "Training ammunition?" "Yes, sir." General Beek looked at the groups of defeated aliens, then at the young faces of the cadets. He had trained soldiers for most of his life. He knew what good warriors looked like. These cadets were good warriors. Better than good. They had faced an impossible situation and won through training, discipline, and teamwork. "Which one is Cadet Kim?" he asked. "Here, sir." Taiho stepped forward and saluted. He was covered in paint and dust, with dark circles under his eyes from exhaustion. But he stood straight and met the general's gaze without flinching. "You took command when communications went down," General Beak said. "You organized the defense and led the counterattack." "I did what I was trained to do, sir." General Beak allowed himself a small smile. "Good answer." He turned to his aide. "Make a note. Cadets Kim, Han, Song, and Lee are to receive the United Earth Medal of First Contact. Instructor Choi as well." "Yes, sir." Over the next several weeks, the world changed. The existence of alien life could not be kept secret. Too many people had been involved in the response. Too many satellites had recorded the Valkyrie ships entering Earth's atmosphere. The governments of Earth released a carefully prepared statement. Alien visitors had arrived. Contact had been made. The situation was under control. They did not mention that the aliens had been defeated by teenagers with paint guns. That detail was classified at the highest levels. Not because it was embarrassing, but because it was strategically valuable. If other alien species learned what had happened, Earth wanted them to draw the right conclusions. The Valkyrie were allowed to contact their homeworld. Fleet Commander Rothak sent a message that would reshape his empire's foreign policy for generations. "These humans are not to be invaded," he reported. "Not now. Not ever. Their untrained young fight with more coordination and ferocity than our finest warriors. Their primitive weapons bypass all our defenses. And they use these weapons for practice." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "If we attack this species, they will not simply defend themselves. They will hunt us across the stars. They will find our worlds, and they will destroy everything we have built. I have looked into their eyes. They do not know how to surrender. They do not know how to give up. They only know how to fight." The Valkyrie High Council listened to Rothak's report in silence. They had expected conquest. Instead, their best commander was recommending permanent peace. After 3 days of debate, they agreed. A Valkyrie diplomatic ship arrived on Earth 2 months later. This time, they came with translators and gifts instead of soldiers and weapons. They came as potential allies, not conquerors. The negotiations were handled by professional diplomats, but the cadets who had won the first battle were invited to observe. They sat in the back of the conference room, wearing formal dress uniforms instead of their paint-splattered gear. Rothak recognized them. He stood up from the negotiating table and crossed the room to where they sat. His translator device hummed as he spoke. "You have grown since we last met," he said to Taeho. Taeho stood up. He was still shorter than the alien commander, but he didn't look up with fear, just curiosity. "You've washed off the paint," Taeho replied. Rothak made a sound that might have been a laugh. "My armor had to be replaced. The paint would not come out. Sorry about that." "Don't be. You fought with honor." Rothak paused. "I have told my people many stories about your species. Some of them even believe me. What do you tell them?" Rothak's 4 eyes focused on Taeho's face. "I tell them that humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because of your weapons or your technology, but because you teach your children to fight before they can properly walk. You train them to face impossible odds and win. You make war into a game, and then you play it better than anyone else." Taeho thought about this for a moment. "We just do what we're trained to do." "Yes," Rothak agreed. "And that is exactly what makes you terrifying." 3 months later, the Non-Aggression Pact was signed. The Valkyrie Empire promised to never threaten Earth or its colonies. In exchange, Earth promised to never share its projectile weapon technology with the Valkyrie's enemies. It was a simple agreement, but it meant peace. Taeho, Jiwoo, Mira, and Doyoung graduated from the academy the following year. Their final evaluation scores were the highest in the institution's history. Instructor Hana had written a single note in their files. Recommend immediate promotion to advanced tactical training. These four kept their heads when first contact turned hostile. They'll make fine officers. Years later, when Taeho became a general himself, reporters would ask him about that day. About how it felt to win humanity's first battle against an alien species. His answer was always the same. We didn't win because we were brave or special. We won because we were trained. When the aliens showed up, we didn't panic. We just did what our instructors taught us. Find cover. Work together. Never give up. Those are the things that matter in any fight. Whether you're using paint guns or plasma cannons. He would pause then, a small smile crossing his face. Although I admit, the paint guns were pretty funny. Across 40 star systems, the story spread. Earth became known as the planet where children defeated armies, where training exercises turned into actual battles, where even the weakest weapons could bring down the mightiest warriors. No alien species ever tried to invade Earth again. They had learned their lesson. Humanity didn't just fight to survive. Humanity fought because fighting was in their blood, in their culture, in the games they played as children. They were born for war, and they had gotten very, very good at it. The galaxy had been warned.